Good Vok, and welcome to the Shir tonight, Motzei Shabbos, Parshas Tetzaveh, Parshas Zocher. And let's go straight into the questions which we have. So, not a question halacha, but a question pshat in davening. So we have in Friday night, we have a mini Chazor Sashat. It's called Brocha Meyen Sheva. It's a condensed form of the 7 brachas of the Friday night Shemona Esrei. So Mogen Avos is the first bracha, Mogen Avraham. Machayim Mesim is the second bracha. Kel Kodesh is the third bracha. Meniach Shabbos Kodesh corresponds to the middle bracha. Lefon of Navoid, V'yir B'Fachet is alluding to the bracha of Ritzei, that we should do the Avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. And then we have an Nidul Shmoi, and then we have Kel Haidois, which is Moedim, Adon HaSholem. Question is, what's this Me'ein HaBrachas? Condensed form of the brachas. Yeah, is that what it means? Is that saying that we've got, tonight we're going to be saying a condensed form of the brachas? Okay, if that's what it means, why is it there? Why is it positioned kind of after Ritzei, and somehow, and Moedim gets a double mention, V'noidul Shmoy and Kelai Dois. So, intrigued, what is this Me'ein HaBrachas? So on the left, you can see here, from the Shaila Mora Siddur, and actually the Kahos translation is very similar, that every day we will thank Hashem for the brachas of that day. Still begs explanation. And I take exception to the comma there. Who says that the comma has to be there? At any rate, Yesh Leimazeh, that, see, in the Mshala Moira, he asks the question, why does Moedim get a double innings? The Americans don't know what I'm talking about. But V'noidul Shmoi and Keilah Haidois, twice Moedim. So he says, well, one is for the regular Moedim and one is for Moedim D'Rabbanan. When Chazal Shas, we have a double Moedim. You don't just delegate, you thank you on your own. That's why you have it twice. Okay. V'yesh Leimar, another pshat, that when we have this idea of me'en, we kind of reflect upon the bracha of that day. So when we have Shabbos coincides with Rosh Chodesh, so then we have Ya'aleh V'Yoveh in Birchas Ritzei. And when we have Chol HaMoed coincides with Shabbos, again Ya'aleh V'Yoveh. So after having said, when the fon of Na'aved B'yirav HaFachad, and there in that bracha of Ritzei, in that bracha, we're going to insert, whenever there is a particular quality of that day, well, we're going to insert that into the bracha of Ritzei. And just by the way, if you forgot to say Ya'aleh V'Yoveh in Ritzei, and you didn't start Moedim yet, you can insert it between the two. Let's say Amach Shechanosa Letzion, Alekena V'Lektei Sen Ya'aleh V'Yoveh Yagia, etc. So therefore, the me'ena, this noidlish mois b'chol yom tov me'ena brachos, is alluding to the to the Ya'aleh V'Yoveh, which is added in Ritzei when appropriate. And if you want that, you can say it's also alluding to Al Hanisim, which is thrown into Moedim. Okay, let's move, and that explains the Noidul Shmoy and the Kelei Dois is not necessarily repetition. It's two separate inyonim. One is the Me'ein HaMoira, the reflecting of the day, the special of the quality of the day. And the other one is Moedim in the normal sense. Okay, let's go on to something much more practical, and that is that case that you've got here, two Mechutonim, and they have the same name. So it's much more well known that we avoid making a shidduch with a father-in-law and son-in-law which will have the same name. Father-in-law is called Baruch, the son-in-law is called Baruch, or for that matter, the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law having the same name. She's called Sprinzi, and the mother-in-law is called Sprinzi. So we would avoid such a shidduch unless one has got, when Chabad is accepted, that if one has got two names. So one is called Yosef and the other one is called Yosef Yitzchak. So then that's considered two separate names and so on. So that's more well known. And many fine Hasidim in the last decade who have added a name to their name Menachem Mendel because they were not finding shidduchim for their sons, for their daughters, because of their Menachem Mendel's, Baruch Hashem. So this is Meir Menachem Mendel, this is Chaim Menachem Mendel, and so on. Moshe Menachem Mendel, whatever it may be. Okay, but now we have a different situation. We have here an issue of two Mechutonim having the same name. And this is actually the same source in the what's called Tzavor Rabbi Yehuda HaChossid, which you can see on the screen. Shnei bnei Odom, two people who have the same name, lo yizdavgu yachad b'yaldeim. They should not make a shidduch between their children. Already in the original Tzavor, it says it's a suffix, whether this is only lezaroi, only for their offspring, or it's for everyone. So it's not so clear that it's for everyone. There's a very interesting letter of the Rebbe you see at the bottom of the screen from Igros Chodesh Chelik Yud Ches, page Kuf Lamed Vav. It's also reprinted in Shulchan Menachem in volume 6. But there's a story. There was some complication with the shidduch, or whatever. It wasn't a straightforward story. And the Rebbe though comments that you should add to a name to one of the mothers, because I see that the name of the mother of the girl and your own mother, their names are identical. So one of them should take on another name, which this is very interesting because here we're talking about mechutonois, whereas the Tzavor talks about mechutonim, and yet the Rebbe is recommending to add a name that the two mechutenistas shouldn't have the same name, and how much more so we should be concerned about having two mechutonim with identical names. Having said that, the rule, I've said this more than once, the inyonim of Segula, which we don't have clear Havana. So the rule is that when the circumstance is slightly different to the precedent, which is clearly spelled out, then one can be lenient. So here on the middle of the screen, you have from a sefer which is exploring the Tzavos Rabbi Yehuda Chossid, going from all different poskim, and he quotes that some say that if one of the two parties is a Kohen or Levi, so then when you write a ksuba, it's so Halevi or HaKohen, then if one of the Kohen and one's not a Kohen, or one's a Levi and the other one's not a Levi, etc., that makes it not identical and therefore compatible. So the source is, in Sefer, one of the Svarim is Shem Shimon, since it's customary to mention the name, the title Kohen or Levi in the ksuba, and that's grounds to say, well, then they're not identical. And so the Shem Shimon writes this. I looked up the actual sefer, and we'll come later to an example where it's important to look up and not just rely on short quotes. But he does say so. It's a long tshuva about this whole thing about names, shidduchim, and he mentions this as a svara, and I think that one can rely on it. They said that svara because, as he says, right. We have on the online, we have here one of our participants is Rabbi Levitansky from Sumi, who told me that when his father went to Yechidus one time and he presented his settle, and the Rebbe it's Alichas Advorim, but the Rebbe says, you have got a title which is a Torah title, Halevi. How come you don't write Halevi? And so, if till then the Levitanskis wrote their names Lamed Ein Vov Vov Yud Tansky, they changed it to Lamed Vov Yud Tansky, because the Rebbe says a Torah which is given in the Torah. Anyway, it's a choshever thing. So if one of them is called Halevi or Hakoyin, then that would be basis to say they're not identical, and you can make a shidduch b'shal toifa b'tzlachas b'doyer shayim yavorach binyan adiyad ala rochas b'toiva nir v'nigla. Okay, here is a question. It's not the first time I had such a question. It's not perhaps slight variation, but here is a story that there's a group of girls who they had a few days off from seminary, and in Eretz Yisrael there's a big thing, you can rent a jeep, I think it means you can rent a Jeep with a driver, I hope. And gives you how do you say, off terrain, whatever it's called, off the track. Apparently, it's very interesting and fun, as the late Rabbi Koppelman of Luzern would say, am hot Geld und Zeit fortman. At any rate, so then they've chosen to go on this trip, and then it's going to cost X amount. So, all right, fine. So they're going to share the cost of the trip. And then, unfortunately, when it comes to the actual trip, one of the girls is not feeling well, and so had to pull out. So now, does that girl have to bear the cost of her share of the trip, or do we say no, she didn't join in, so she doesn't have to pay? So this is the question, the Choshet Mishpat question. We're not arbitrating here, I'm just presenting the halacha as it's presented in a sefer called Imre Yaakov. Now, Imre Yaakov, actually from Rabbi Yaakov Meir Stern, I had the privilege to spend a few weeks in the Beis Horoah of the late Rav Wosner, Shevet HaLevi, and the way he had the arrangement was he had what we would call a surgery, and he was in the inner room, and they had the outer room, and there was like a whole uh, like a factory, one after the other. People coming with shilas. This is in Bnei Brak, and so he would have one of his talmidim on duty during that time, and if it was something was more challenging, they would go into Rav Wosner. So one of those who was on duty was Rav Yaakov Meir Stern, and so I spent some time with him. At any rate, he's published a volume on the Alter Rebbe's Choshen Mishpat. Now, the Alter Rebbe's Choshen Mishpat, I would call it the Orach Chaim of Choshen Mishpat. It's the ethics of Choshen Mishpat rather than the arbitration aspect of Choshen Mishpat. And so the Alter Rebbe's Choshen Mishpat, how many pages is it? 50, 60 pages max. And he made from this a whole sefer, exploring like a Mishnah Berurah style, Biurim, Likutim, very, very nice sefer. So he deals with this situation, very similar situation. If several people have hired a car and one of them didn't turn up, and so left an empty space. And so the company, the group of people, would have to pay the driver as was agreed. He had agreed a price with the group, and okay, and then he compares this. What would be a case of a childcare or a group or a nursery of some sort, and the parent doesn't send their child, so they pay, how much each parent pays for the care, and one day the parent don't send their child to nursery, and so the one who's running the nursery says you need to pay for the days that you missed. So he says, if the child wasn't well or honest, it's poshut that they don't have to pay. But if there was no onus, if they just decided to stay home, then they would have to pay for the time which they missed. And similarly, he goes into again in the Tamtis, summarizes. People hired a car together, and one of them didn't turn up. Shaloi machmas einus. So if he didn't join by choice, then he would have to pay. But if the participant didn't participate because of illness or other circumstances beyond their control, then they are not mechuyev, not obliged to pay their share. Okay, so the other three girls will have to kind of bear the extra cost between the three of them. Okay, now let's go on to a question which is the following: that a boy was born on the 30th of Adar Aleph, and it comes bar mitzvah, and it's only one Adar, and on top of it, there's no 30th of Adar. Adar is a 29-day month. So here's the question: what day should he, or does he turn bar mitzvah? And the similar question would be as a yortzeit. If someone had passed away on the 30th of Adar Rishon, and comes a regular year, when is the Yortzeit observed? So interestingly, now you'll be taken aback perhaps, but the some poskim say it should be Lamed Shvat. And you want to ask why jump back? Well, actually, Lamed Shvat is Aleph the Rosh Chodesh Adar. So this person, since the main Adar is Adar Sheni, this person passed away in Aleph the Rosh Chodesh Adar. So now, okay, there's no Adarishan, so it goes back to Lamed Shvat, which is Aleph the Rosh Chodesh Adar. So there is such an opinion. And however, you see here on the screen, we have from the Dirshu edition of the Mishnah Brura in relation to Bar Mitzvah. So that opinion which I said about Yortzeit is in Siman Tov Kof Samach Ches, which talks about fasts and fast on the Yortzeit. When should the fast on Yortzeit for a parent be observed? And there is that svara of Aleph the Rosh Chodesh Adar, otherwise known as Lamed Shvat. Here you see that this question is discussed in the Sefer Binyan Tzion, Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger, who wrote also the Ruch LaNer, if I'm not mistaken. And then he goes on, he says that actually Rav Elyashiv says, no, we're going to hang on. It's a Sophic, whether he turns Bar Mitzvah Lamed Shvat. Perhaps we have to wait till Rosh Chodesh Nisan. There is no Lamed Adar, so once it comes to Rosh Chodesh Nisan, we're past Lamed Adar, obviously, and so that's when he turns Bar Mitzvah. Reb Shlomo Zalman is also takes that view, since there's a machlokas whether he turns Bar Mitzvah or Lamed Shvat or Rosh Chodesh Nisan, so we're going to be machmer. So it's not such a big issue as Chabad we put on tefillin, mentioned we put on tefillin 2 months before the Bar Mitzvah. So as far as putting on tefillin, he'll put on before in any case. But as to be a chazan, to be moitzi, a tzibur, etc., that we would wait until Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Right. So there are different opinions. I think that would be the Lamaisa would wait to the Bar Mitzvah for sure would be we'll celebrate on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Still, when it comes to Yortzeit, perhaps there's a svara to do the earlier date as well as the later date. Right. Let's go on. So here's an interesting scenario. This Shabbos was Parsha Zocher. And I got a call from a shliach in France. He's got 2 candidates for maftir. What's more important is that both of them are sponsors of the Kiddush. And they both want to be Yortzeit, whatever, they both want to have maftir. He would happily arrange, and they would be happy with this, if they could do another minyan in the next room. However, he doesn't have a second balkoira. So what does he do? He said, they give him hamsor. That we'll do like this. We'll do Kriyas HaTorah, and it comes to maftir, so 10 people will go in the next room, and then the balkoira will lein in the main shul, lein the 3 psukim of Parshas Zocher, and then he'll apologize and go to the next room, and they'll read Parshas Zocher again for those 10 people with another Sefer Torah. And in this way, everyone will have their maftir and they have Torah, and all of so that was his hamsor. So I do this shir on in Ivrit. I do this on Wednesdays. Someone sends to me that the Piskei Teshuvos actually addresses this. He says it's okay. I told him it's okay. I don't see a problem. But then he says, yeah, you're right. It says it in Piskei Teshuvos, and that you can see on the screen in Siman Reish Pei Daled, talks about Maftaira, that in his, you got a case of two candidates who want to have Maftir and Haftaira. So you can make another minyan for Kriyas HaTorah and Maftir. And yeah, so you can go and divide into 2 separate minyanim. All right, so that's amazing. I'm Yofa Kivanti. I got it right. Well, I want to tell you, I once had a story, and I've written about it's published in the Sefer. There was a certain community where the Balkoira is a Baltshuva, Makura, and he's the standard Balkoira every week. It turns out that he has Yortzeit, the Balkoira has Yortzeit for his mother, the particular Shabbos, and wants to have Maftir. Then the one who was his Malamed, who was Makar of him, kind of, also wants to has also Yortzeit, the same Shabbos. So now it comes to Shiloh, who goes outside and who stays inside. So the elder one, the elder Chassid, he felt, why should he, he's one of the founders of the community, he should be having in the Cheder Sheni. But the Bakhoira says, what must I do? I mean, I'm standing here next to Sefer Torah. How do I go next door? The kids, I was more noted to say, like a dinner de bar mitzvah, you're already there, he should give him priority. The kids, now I see that I have a simple answer. They could have take out for Maftir, take out another Sefer Torah, and everyone should be happy and taken for another room. Oh, but then I wasn't happy with that because, as we all know, that there's a whole set of rules in the case you find a mistake in a Sefer Torah, and you have to take out another Sefer Torah. But when it comes to Maftir, if the mistake was found in Shvi, then you don't take out another Sefer Torah for Maftir. The Shvi is going to double up as Maftir. And if I may say, there was a story in Summer 70 that everyone would always have Maftir. And they found a mistake in Shvi. So they went to Reb Zalman Shimon. They asked him what to do. So, Fregnish Geshayel, they went to Sefer Torah. Halacha vein Meirin Kane or something like that. But we know that normally you don't take out another Sefer Torah for Maftir. So to take out a second Sefer Torah to do a Maftir in the next room, that's not okay. Well, in this case, this Shabbos, because it's Pasha Zocher, and in any case you're taking out a Sefer Torah for Pasha Zocher, then it's justified to take another Sefer Torah for Pasha Zocher in the next room. So Dafka for this Shabbos, this solution would work, but for Rega Shabbos, this solution would not work. Having said all that Hakdama, now let's scroll down, let's skim through the Tshuva in Reb Moshe, in Igris Moshe. Now, first, the Igris Moshe, here was talking about this Tovshin Tesvo, and you got two boys to turn bar mitzvah the same Shabbos. They both want to perform, as in do their bar mitzvah, maftir, and haftorah on the same Shabbos. And he goes into the possibility of them doing a duet, of the two boys standing together at the Sefer Torah and singing, and they do it together. But then ultimately Moshe rejects this. Even though you can say Ida de Chaviva, you can call the Mishdamit, Lepoil, he rejects that. So that's where he starts off. Lamaisa also likris that two of them should read together, that's not on. And so he said they're going to do like this. You're going to take 10 people after Kriyas HaTorah, before Maftir, and then they'll go out. Then after the first Maftir and Haftorah is done, then the 10 people who volunteer to go outside, they will come back into Shul, and they will do a repeat of Maftir and Haftorah. And he says, although it's a Tircha de Tzibura, but the assumption is with the Bar Mitzvah, people will be moichel that they should to hear both Bar Mitzvah boys doing their piece, which I think is a very true thing. Bar Mitzvah people will be ready to indulge with a second performance. Okay. So now then he goes into what do you do about Hagbah? And normally, as soon as you've finished Maftir, then you do Hagbah, and then you read the Haftarah. But here Reb Moshe goes into fascinating detail. Don't do Hagbah and Glila after the first Kriya. Just cover the Sefer Torah and do the Haftarah with the Sefer Torah laying on the bimah with just a cloth over it. And then you'll have the 10 people who will come in and will do a repeat performance. Because the reading of Maftir is only Bishla Kovad HaTorah. You shouldn't read in Novi without having read from the Torah. And it's not justified to take out a Sefer Torah just for Maftir. And if you do Hagbah and Galila, possibly the unwrapping the Sefer Torah again would be like taking out a Sefer Torah just for Maftir. Then therefore he says, let's not do that. Just leave the Sefer Torah first time round, leave it on the bimah, covered over, and then the second one. So what's fascinating is when you see the way it's quoted in the Piskei Teshuvos, it seems to be perfectly legitimate to start off do another minyan as I described in the second room for maftir. And you look in the Piskin, and you look in the source in the Igris Moshe, he didn't say that. It's true you can make a separate a double reading, but he didn't say you can take out a Sefer Torah. Happily, in this case, because it's Shabbos Ocher, you need to take out a Sefer Torah for maftir, and a separate Sefer Torah is justified. But the regular Shabbos, this solution wouldn't be available. Okay, let's move on to another davening question. And that is, someone contacted me this past week. There is a famous halacha that if you started a minyan with, you started a unit of davening and there were 10 people, and in the middle one of them drifted out. Shouldn't have, but he did. We're not here to judge why they drifted out. Precious, it's not our cheshbon at the moment. But you're allowed to finish that unit. So now this is in Siman Nun Hey. You've started off Chazaras Hashatz. Then so you're allowed to finish Chazaras Hashatz and Seder Kedusha, which is in our language Uvolat Zion, and you can say the Kaddish after Uvolat Zion. What about the Kaddish before Uvolat Zion? The half Kaddish, which is after Tachnun or after Chazaras Hashatz, he doesn't seem to address that. He only says you can say the full Kaddish after Uvolat Zion. Well, the Mishnah Berurah fills that in, and he says Kol Shekain the Kaddish, the half Kaddish before Shemon Esrei, for sure you can say that. If you can say the Kaddish after Avodat Zion, for sure you can say the half Kaddish. Well, it's not so clear. I mean, the Alter Rebbe doesn't say so. It seems to be just the Chazan can say the Kaddish after Avodat Zion. Now, let's scroll to the next slide. You see the source is in the Sefer Trumas Hadeshen. The Trumas Hadeshen, written by Rabbi Yisrael Isserlin, approximately 500 plus years ago. He wrote his Sefer. It's a Shalos Teshuvos, but he invented the questions. So it's untypical of a Shalos Teshuvos. He put together 354 questions and answers, and that's where the name Deshen comes from. Shin Nun Dalet, so Trumas Deshen. That's the Sefer. Very, very respected Sefer in Halacha. Now, so he writes here something to the effect, so you read that line, which I've highlighted in green, you get the impression, oh no, you're not meant to say Kaddish until after Holotzin. Yeah, that's the Bahashkofa Rishoin. But now let's read it more carefully and see how it was a misunderstanding. He says the following. You say that you started off with 10 people, and you're allowed to finish off that unit. Now, the unit was Shmon Esrei, Chazaras Hashatz. So now the question is, Chazaras Hashatz, I understand you can finish. But afterwards, Avodat Zion also? What's that? It's a separate unit, ostensibly. But neither the Seder Kedusha or Kaddish, not only can you finish off Shmon Esrei, but you can also finish off Avodat Zion. That's considered the Kaddish after Avodat Zion is Gemar Tfilas Yudches. It's the winding out down after Shmoina Esrei. It's still the unit. Velochein, and because the Kaddish after Avodat Zion is a finish off, it's a finale of the Shmoina Esrei. That's why he doesn't say Kaddish Sholem until after then. The Kaddish Sholem is Tiskabel Tzleisen. When you say Kaddish after Avodat Zion, that Kaddish is saying that the Shemona Esrei should be miskabel, tiskabel. And therefore, Zeu Gmar Tefillah. He's saying that the Kaddish after Avodat Zion is addressing the Shemona Esrei. And therefore, it's still considered one unit with the Shemona Esrei. And as a result, Yotzim Iksoson, at the beginning of Chazaras Hashatz, you're allowed to say the Kaddish after Avodat Zion, where you say Teskabel Tzloisen. But as the Mishnah Berurah said, there's no question that the Kaddish before Asher Avodat Zion is for sure. That's the one which is right after the Shemona Esrei. That's for sure you can say. As we discussed, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, if someone walks out, if you had a minyan from Ma'ariv, and in the middle of the quiet Shemona, the middle of Shemona Esrei of Ma'ariv, your 10th man disappeared, you can say the Kaddish after Shemona Esrei. And so the same thing here, the Kaddish after Shemon Esrei, the Chatzi Kaddish is no question. The Chiddush is that even the Kaddish after Volotzion is also justified. So it's poshed up short, but you read it quickly, you don't realize that's what you say. Lo megein weiter. Okay, now I want to tell you, I told you last week about this group of this tefillah, this Koilul Iyun tefillah, and Baruch Hashem, it's now there's been a cycle of the three Magidei Shir. As I said, I provide the skeletons of the halacha framework, and then comes one says the Pirush HaMilas, Rabbi Klein, and then Rabbi Forkash gives the Bir al Chassidus. They breathes the neshama into the skeleton and the flesh. And really very gishmak. I followed their shiurim, and there's been very good, very excited feedback on this program. 180 people around the world have joined, so it's really Baruch Hashem Hatzlocha, and that's the beginning. Every will help, and it should go more rather than less. Now we did three. So with the three sessions are all on Birchas HaShachar. Fascinating stuff which came up from the Chassidish insight. But meanwhile, came up the question, from when did it become minig Chabad to say brachas at home? Birchas Shachar at home. And most shuls you'll go to, they say, well, most Ashkenazi shuls, they say brachas farnomid, yeah? There's the brachas, and then the korbanos, and then hoidu. And in Chabad, we have this business we have a minig of saying brachas at home. So actually, in the Siddur, I did not note this correctly. I just said it's minig Anash. I didn't go for how far back it is. What you have on the screen is from the Shar HaKavonos, which is written by Reb Chaim Vital, Talmud of the Arizal, and he says about the 18 brachas of the morning, which the minig ha'olam is to say them in shul, and everyone answers Amen. Yesh befak bekin. Yeah. V'ra'isi as Moiri Zal, shehu lo hoya mesadron bebeis hakneses, ela bebeisoi bekumei mimitosoi. Kfi sheniseidan is bigmor. So going back to the Arizal already, so he goes against that, different to the norm, which was accepted that you say Birchas HaShachar in shul. Instead, he would say them at home. And this is quoted in the Kaf HaChaim. And so I took a Sephardic Siddur, contemporary Sephardic Siddur, and the Birchas HaShachar don't seem to be said at home. Now, on the left of the screen, you have a copy of a Siddur which is known as Venezia or Rapad, Reish Pei Dalet. This Siddur was printed some, let's say, 15 years before the Arizal was born. And we have it's on the Oitzer HaChochma, and this is the Siddur, the print which the Arizal used. And several times in Pri Etz Chaim, Reb Chaim Vital says that I'm using this Siddur of Venezia, Reish Pei Dalet, and at this point you should change this, change that. So I was curious to see pre-Arizal Sfard, before the Arizal. Says there you can see on the screen. Hanichnas leveis hakneses says v'ani berev chastecha avoy beisecha, and then al netilas yadayim asher yotza. Reb Mendel, tell me in your shul, al netilas yadayim is said also in shul? No, al netilas yadayim asher yotza l'kain hashom is said at home. You start from hanes al sech vivina or whatever. Yeah. But that's the more popular meaning. But here, Ad Kedei Kach, even Al Tisadayim was said in shul. Discussion, Al Tevis Shechanor. Okay, but that was their minig, and the Arizal, and that goes back to Reb Amram Goen. So this idea of saying brachas in shul has been around for more than 1,000 years, and yet the Arizal changed this. All right, so that's one thing from the Arizal. Then the question is also, when did Chabad change? And all other shtibelach, all other Polish shtibelach, by them is the Seder brachas in shul. So when did it start coming into Chabad? So now on the screen you have again, this is from the Shklov Tov Kuf Samar Gimel print. This is from the print was of the Siddur, which was printed B'chayo of the Alter Rebbe. And you can see there, after Elu Dvorim, you can see in the small writing before Matoivu, there's the little words, Bevoyo Leveis Akneses, Yoimar Matoivu Olecha Yaakov. Now, curiously, this caption, Bevoyo Leveis Akneses Yoimar, was dropped in later editions. The Ashar HaKoilel has some kind of, it says Kvishi is Kamon. I don't know. I don't know why it was dropped. I would say, in my Sid I write this, that even if you daven at home, the minig is the same Matoivu, even if you didn't come to shul. But this is telling you that until here is said at home. You come to shul, you start saying Matoivu. So this union of saying brochus at home is going back, as I say, already the Alter Rebbe included it in the Siddur, and it goes back to the Arizal. Now, to explain it a little bit more, is the following: that if you get up at 7 o'clock and 7:15 you're ready in shul with your towels and tefillin on, so then it makes sense. You say, you just woken up, you're saying brachas and going into davening. But if you have a seder, you get up early, as the Arizal would, and you're going to have a seder aveda of learning and etc. whole hachonas, and then 2 hours, 3 hours later, you're going to daven. Well, why should you leave the Birchas HaShachar for all of this? Or why should you delay all of this? Because of the Seder of learning Chassidus before davening and Hachonas for davening, therefore it makes so much more sense to say the Birchas HaShachar earlier on. And that also explains there's a couple of little stories about someone turns up in shul at 11 o'clock and starts saying Anoisin Lasech Vivino, and whoever it was, the Rebbe or a Rebbe says, "Oh, Aklugahon, Aklugahon." The very smart Sechvi is 11 o'clock, but possibly the deep, not that he necessarily woke up late and turned up. Could be he did lots of stuff in between. But what's the sense of saying so late in the day? You say it closer to when you woke up, and then you do your hachonas, and then you daven when you're ready to daven. But yesh laharich, but that seems to be a good source for the Minich Chabad to say brochus at home. There is a letter, I think, to Rav Ushpol. There's a shul in Borough Park, a Chabad shul. But most of the people who came to that shul, there was a Nusachari shul, but most of the people did not daven Nusachari. And there was a question of introducing saying brochus in the shul. And he says, because a lot of people don't say brochus at home, therefore we should say brochus in shul. So the Rebbe answers, but there are going to be those people who say brachas at home, and they'll say it a second time, it shall be bracha l'atola. So the one outweighs the other. And the Rebbe didn't okay to introduce brachas in shul. That's the Chabad custom to say brachas at home. It stays that way. There's another letter of the Rebbe. Someone's criticizing about the fact that the Chabad are davening late and missing Zman Krishma. And the Rebbe writes to him that you're evidently unaware that the Chabad is a seder of saying brachas at home and to saying until it says actually till Rabbi Shmuel, to say at home and say it early. And therefore you've already said Shema earlier on in the day. But actually in your shul, when they start, whatever it is, 9 o'clock, by the time they've gone through Pesukah Zimmer until they get to Shema, is going to be after Zman Krishma. So actually the problem is in those shuls rather than the Chabad minig of davening later, but saying Brochas and Shema earlier. Okay, let's move on. I see there's a couple of chats which I didn't respond to before. Nomen was der Eibishter allein. So Rabbi Tansky, going back to his father's Yechidus, and where the Rebbe had kind of called him out for not mentioning Halevi. So the Rebbe said to him, "Anomen was the Eibishter allein hotem gegeben," the name which the Eibush himself gave it to you. Right. Rabbi Blesovsky is saying about the story with the brochas. It was Rabbi Telushkin. Sorry, I said Rabbi Ushpol. Okay. The Rebbe says better that the mispalim might miss brochas and rather than say it twice. Right, let's move. So someone asked me about the Seder of Kriyas Megillah, if you're with brochus, um, if you're laning for a group of people after you've already heard yourself in shul, or you've been laning on your own. So here you have from Nesivim B'Stei Shlichus, Volume 2, the chapter on Purim, one who's already heard Megillah and reading for women, if there's someone amongst that group who's unable to make a bracha, so the reader can make the bracha for them. And this is the concept of arvus. We have a mitzvah, we have a responsibility that someone else should also do a mitzvah. And therefore I can say Asher Ketshonu b'mitzvah v'tzivanu, for someone else is unable to say a bracha. If they are able to say the bracha, then they should say the bracha. Then I don't know what is done in the communities, but there are those who say that if there's just women, so one of the women will say the bracha on behalf of all the other women, of course, and they're all capable of saying a bracha, all right, but one will say, and everyone will, and all the other ladies will answer Amen. Now there is a discussion about what's the nusach bracha. So whereas by a man the bracha is al mikra megillah, so in Paskin they say for a woman it would be lishmoya. Some have the nusach lishmoya megillah, some say lishmoya mikra megillah. So if it's a woman would be making the bracha, or a man is making a bracha just for women, then the nusach would be slightly different. Not al mikra megillah, rather lishmoya mikra megillah. Right, let's move on. And that is simple question. Someone asked me, he has a Beis Chabad and they have like a restaurant or something, and they have the chef will come at 5 o'clock in the morning and start preparing. And so they're peeling eggs already at 5 o'clock in the morning, which is still dark. And there's a whole business of leaving eggs overnight, peeled eggs overnight with Ruach Ra. So he's asking, is there a problem of Ruach Ra if it's not the whole night, only half the night? So on the screen you have, this is from the Sefer Shmiras Haguf V'Hanefesh, from someone called Yosef Yitzchak Lerner. It's not because it's Lubavitcher, they have the name Yosef Yitzchak. But so he quotes here from the Kloisenberger Rov in Divrei Yatziv, and he asks this question. And although when it comes to Kodshim, part of the night would also be the issue of Lino, but that's not the minhag. We're not choshish for this, and we will say that the business of Linas Lailov, leftover night, would only be if it's a whole night, but just a few hours of the night would not be a reason to be worried. And that's similar to what I said before. When you have a thing of a skula, a chashash of a skula, so then when there's a change to the precedent, one can be meichel. All right, the last thing which I want to share with you, and someone sent me some feedback. And at first I thought, it's nice feedback. I always enjoy nice feedback. But I thought if there's something which I could share with the tzibur, so and especially there's something with the Rebbe, so it's valuable to share this. So this is one of our listeners. So he writes that we're talking about names, about a name which had, if you remember, there was a person who thought his name was Michael, Michael. Then he turns out his name he was given at the bris was Elimelech. So the story is like this. My mother, when she was born, it looked like they would not have any more children. They were Shomer Shabbos, they were active in the community, and they named my mother Yitzchak Moshe. Uh, so it looks like, well, I can understand the mentality. If you're using normally an English name, um, and the Jewish name is only for Jewish stuff, so it's all Zan Yitzchak Moshe, who cares? But so they gave the name Yitzchak Moshe. She had an English name which she used, and when they got married, the Rav, who was Masada Kedushin, refused to put Yitzchak Moshe, the name of the Kala. So he put her English name, whatever it was, Sadie, whatever. He put in as her name. Okay. My mother didn't like the English name either. And so she made a name for herself, Irina Masha. The only one who called her Irina Masha was my father. Okay. When my sister was 15 years old, she was in Yechidus Protis, and she asked the Rebbe about what name she should be using, her mother should use. And when we put down a name for a brocha with the mother's name, what name they should use, because it was like a do-it-yourself job. And the Rebbe told the sister that each person is a balabais of their own name, and she can use what name she wished to use. So that's really a nice thing to share. The Rebbe said that she chose to call herself Irina Masha. That's her prerogative, and that should be accepted. Then he writes, he used to live in Manchester. He found this out from his sister many years later. In the meantime, he himself had asked Rav Schneebal of Shalom in Manchester the same question, and he also had told him to use the name Irina Masha. So the Rebbe, as Rabbi Schneebal told him the same thing, that if the mother had chosen to use that name, then she has the right to do so, and that really becomes her name. Okay, that's what I have to share with you for this evening. And shall I say, let's finish off. Where people are asking, what do you do about the Suda on Friday? So I don't know whether we did discuss this in this forum. It does say in Shulchan Aruch in Hilchos Purim that it should be before Chatzos. There is in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch in Simon Reish Mem Tes. He talks about not about Purim. He talks about the Suda, other Sudas. There is room to be mekel until Shoah Siris, which would be about 3 o'clock. The thing is that possibly Sudas Purim, being a larger Suda, more, and some poskim want to say, although for other Sudas it's okay to have in the early afternoon, but Sudas Purim should be left before Chatzos. So there is a preference, at least, the preference to have it before Chatzos. I'd like to say the following, though, that the whole chashash here is that if you eat later, you won't have an appetite for your Sudas Shabbos. That nowadays people manage to have an appetite a few hours later again. I think Nishtanu Ha'itim. There was recently a Sikha of the Rebbe how he eats. He has breakfast, and then he has elevenses, and then he has lunch, and then he has tea and high tea, and he'll call him. He's not a Zayla B'Seive because everything has got a different name. So, so there is a preference that the meal should start at least before Chatzos. That's a preference. But if one doesn't manage, so it's okay to have it later. Again, preferably before about 3 o'clock. I'm sure series. And if it happens later, zeg het niet gevaarlijk. The Alter Rebbe says in Reish Mem Tes, the Chechet HaSudas Mitzvah. So this Sudas Mitzvah, so you won't have an appetite for Sudas Shabbos, but Sudas Purim is also Sudas Mitzvah. So it's echt niet gevaarlijk. All right, de Rike zal zijn van de Hapachu, and we should see Yeshua's Klal Yisrael, the Ike, Yeshua with Mashiach Tzidkeinu, Meher V'Ameinu Mamash. Agotavach.
Dvach. Dvach.
Good